To me, what makes a game like The Last of Us or BioShock or Portal really, really grand is that it's special, it's unique, it stands alone. There's nothing else quite like it. Sure, eventually they may iterate upon these games, but at their inception, they were founded based on their originality, and you can easily identify these pieces of content. You know from one screenshot that that's The Last of Us, that's Fallout 3, that's Mirror's Edge. And the same can be said for a lot of the early downloadable releases on Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network. I remember getting Braid and Limbo, Calling All Cars, Fat Princess, Shadow Complex, and being blown away by these new experiences. Because each week we were pretty much always getting something new. Whether it was a new art style or a new gameplay mechanic, it felt so fresh, and it was exciting to anticipate these releases because you knew it was going to be something that would tickle you in a way that you probably hadn't been ever tickled before, or at least for quite a while. The reintroduction of retro games, the revival of 2D, all of these things were really very exciting, especially at a time when the gaming industry was so hell-bent and focused on first-person shooters. Now that that's kind of changed a little bit, we have this very booming indie scene, and that's beautiful in many ways. I'm so glad and so happy and proud of many of these smaller studios that are able to expose their game to the masses and get the recognition that they deserve, get the opportunity that they deserve to share their work, their dreams, their passions, their ideas with a humongous audience, whether it be on Steam or on console. That's really great, and I'm all for that. But in the process, I feel like we've lost a little something. I feel like those special moments are much fewer, farther between, because for every game that does the Limbo art style, there's 5 others. And that never used to be the case, but now with so many indie studios across the globe, so many opportunities to place your game on the Steam platform, on the Xbox platform, the PlayStation platform, even the Nintendo platform, it feels like everything is a little bit of a retread, a little bit recycled. And sure, there are definitely tons of gems and even tons of really good games, but it's harder to weed out those really magical moments amongst a giant crowd. I kind of liken it to if your local movie theater started allowing local filmmakers to show their movies off in one of the theaters, and maybe you'd see a new film technique or a new storytelling style that really wowed you. But imagine if there were 50 of these movies at the movie theater every week, and it was almost impossible to sift through what was a 5-star movie and what was a 2-star movie, and you ended up watching a lot of bad movies and saw a lot of repeated styles and a lot of bad filters used over and over again. And definitely the quality was constantly on the rise, right? They're getting better, and it was great for this movement of young filmmakers. But at a certain point, you would be like, man, I kind of just want the cream of the crop. I kind of just want that uniqueness. I remember when they first showed that young filmmakers movie, and I was like, wow, this is really cool, and such a change of pace. Because now that pace has been totally changed. It's not a change of pace to see a cool game like a Braid or a Limbo. It's kind of the norm. And I think in that process, we've lost a little of it. You know, it kind of consumes itself in its growth. And this happens with almost everything, I'm sure. Even things like Call of Duty, like Assassin's Creed, that started off, to me, much more fun and special and grand, have lost much of that spark. You know, we're on to the 7th and 8th Assassin's Creed. God only knows how many Call of Duties, and it's like, can you recreate that magic moment each time? Absolutely not. It's not possible. For someone, can you? Yes. But for everyone, no. I'm sure there's people that did not play the Xbox Live Arcade games that I played, and so when they see the Limbo style, that minimalist, black and white, shadowy look, they're like, wow, this is the most impressive thing ever. But to me, it feels like it is just a long-lost cousin of that original Limbo, and now there are new indie games, it feels like almost every day, at least dozens weekly. You go on Steam and it's like you can't even figure out what is going on. What is a new AAA release? What is a new indie release? What is an old game that they're bringing to Steam? And perhaps that's part of their goal. They want to confuse you so that you don't just isolate and filter out and only buy certain things. But to me, it creates a real problem. I find myself ignoring these games almost entirely because I don't want to waste the time dealing with something that looks like something I know and ends up being something I don't want to know. And that's not to say that experimentation isn't valuable, and it's not to say that a bad game isn't good to play every once in a while. Without the bad games, without the subpar games, we wouldn't really truly be able to understand what a fantastic 10 out of 10 game is. Would we respect and appreciate the storytelling of The Last of Us as much if we didn't have games that were really kind of crummy when it came to cutscenes? Would we appreciate the world vision of Ken Levine in stuff like BioShock Infinite if we didn't have games that were really lackluster and felt dead when we played them? I don't know, but I think that the fact is, this growth of the indie scene, it's almost harming itself, and I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to stop it. I don't think it can be stopped, and I'm wondering if in a few years, people become so sick and tired of the new, because it's no longer the new, it's the same, that it kind of collapses upon itself. Roguelike started off being like this really cool new thing. It was a little bit of retro flair, a little bit of just very, very demanding in terms of what you needed skill-wise and persistence-wise, but now it's like there are 5 million roguelikes, and there are little tweaks here and there, but gosh, I remember when I thought it was so cool that a small game came out. It's like a breath of fresh air from the typical cycle, and now we've got like 5 million games releasing every week, whether it's, the next Madden, the next Battlefield, or the next indie game, and this is compounded by mobile platforms. Mobile platforms are growing insanely huge, and you see very disturbing trends there as well. A great game called Threes came out a couple months ago. It's a fantastic mathematical puzzle game that I loved. I played it a ton on my iPhone, but it fell victim to its own Sarlacc pit of troubles when duplicates came out and became more known and in some cases more popular than the original. How does that feel to make that first game called Threes, and now you're getting outcharted by games called 2048 or whatever they ended up being called, that are carbon copies with different visual looks? That's awful. And I'm not saying that the indie scene tries to do this. I know that that specific example is very, very localized to these mobile platforms where things can be iterated on very, very quickly. There aren't as many standards and whatnot, but Steam is pretty open as well. And early access is just another demon in this process because it's beautiful in a lot of ways. You get to try out a very cool game early on, see what's up. At the same time, though, you're getting an unfinished product. What happens when EA decides to start doing early access? And so, you get a multiplayer experience that just doesn't work, and it's early access, so that becomes okay. I would rather play something in its complete full state and be able to judge its merits on what the designers intended as the full product rather than the 60% product. And I understand getting in on the ground floor because you want to be a part of that thought process, a part of that, true beta type growth. I don't know that many of these games are using that, though. It seems more of a way to hook players early and hope that you're going to be able to carry them over onto a real release. But again, if I see a game pop up on early access, it's very hard for me to get that enthusiasm again when it, quote, finally fully releases. When does that even happen? At what moment is a game truly out? And this all boils back to the same original question and the same original issue that I posed at the top of this video, which is that special games, to me, thrive because of their unique properties and the fact that it's a magical moment. I'm not talking about necessarily the, quote, best technical games. I'm not talking about the best graphics. I'm not talking about the most popular multiplayer shooter. I'm talking about the games that really leave a mark on you. The game that comes maybe once, twice, 3 times if we're lucky a year. And not every game has to be those games, but something like Braid, something like Limbo, something like Flower, even Journey, I will remember those forever. And I've probably played 50 times as many indie games in the last 12 months as I did at the beginning of the Xbox 360, Xbox Live Arcade, PlayStation 3, PlayStation Network era. And I don't know that I remember hardly any of them. Is more better? Sure, there are more choices to go through, but like I mentioned with that movie theater example, would you rather have one really, really awesome indie film be shown at your local theater, or would you rather have 500 for you to parse through, each borrowing something from the next, repetitive film styles and techniques, and maybe even actors appearing throughout the schedule? I don't know. I feel a little bit bad bringing this up because I know the indie scene is something that should be trumpeted and it's a big triumph, and I definitely applaud that scene for all the efforts and all the positive steps that they've made in the last few years especially. But it's just at a point where it feels like it's eating itself And that's not the fault of any individual person, because someone making a game is trying to make the best dang game they can make and make the game that they want to make. It's not like they're trying to fit into a sea of other games or fit into a timetable of what is popular at the time. Maybe in some instances, but I genuinely believe that most indie designers are out there for the heart of it. It just is a weird instance where we're able to be exposed to everything. So many. There's so much more money now in that area, so much more focus, so much more press coverage. It's troublesome for reviewers as well. How do you know when to review something, what to review something? But for me as a game player, what I really care about is my experience with the game. And I have to say that it's been diluted by the massive amount of titles and the massive amount of sharing of styles, sharing of mechanics, sharing of genres. I kind of wish it would cut back a little bit. Go back to when you were very, very eager for that Xbox Live Arcade release. Very, very eager to see a game coming out in 3 weeks on Steam and marking that on your calendars. I can't even keep up with what comes out in one day, let alone 1 week on Steam. And obviously Steam is more of a problem than something like Xbox One or PlayStation 4, but you will note that there are many, many more indie games releasing on those platforms than there was last generation. It's something that Sony has definitely used to toot their own horn that they are at the forefront of what gamers want. And I agree in a lot of ways, because the greatest downloadable games, the greatest indie games are true gems. We've seen over the last few years stuff like Gone Home really receive immense recognition, and well-deserved. I just think that there's so much clutter throughout the year that possibly more gems are even getting lost. I have favorites like FTL. Stuff even small like The Walking Dead really shines, but look what Telltale's doing. They're going and making 5 or 6 or however many it is games in that exact style. The Wolf Among Us, Game of Thrones, Borderlands, Walking Dead. I'm sure the next announcement is right around the corner as well. And this affects AAA with Assassin's Creed, 10 million, Final Fantasy 10 million, Call of Duty, Gears of War. Everything is an iteration, and I would just like a little more originality. Guys and girls, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Are you overwhelmed by the onslaught of indie releases? Do you think that somehow it should be cut back to where we really looked forward to that new release, that Shadow Complex, that Calling All Cars? Maybe those aren't your favorite games, but I'm sure you have a game from Xbox Live Arcade or the eShop or PlayStation Network that you really, really enjoyed for its uniqueness. Let me know what that game is in the comments below, and also let me know what you think the solution might be to this problem, or is it unsolvable and eventually in a few years, indie will become Call of Duty and we will resent it in the same way that we do Activision's tried and true yearly shooter. Thanks so much for watching. Have a fantastic day. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the discussion. I'll be commenting in the comments with all of you. Look forward to that too. Till next time though, drink some hot chocolate. Thanks again. We will see you all later.